everybody. It's really great to see you all here. Thanks for coming out this afternoon for our artist conversation with a group that we are so thrilled to get to present this spring, yMusic. This is a wonderful chamber ensemble that is dedicated to commissioning, performing, writing, recording new music specifically for their instrumentation, and has really, over the years, developed a tremendous body of repertoire. Not only that, but a reputation as amazing collaborators. And this is a group that, in addition to the work that they do with their ensemble in a new classical chamber music context, has collaborated with Paul Simon, John Legend, Regina Spektor, has done projects with Bill T. Jones, Sufjan Stevens, Ben Folds, so many, many more. And their breadth and depth of experience is really something that we are just thrilled to get to share with our audience. So this afternoon, we are going to have a conversation with the group and also get to hear some of their music. We have a concert coming up on Wednesday, April 6th at 8 p.m. That will also be here indoors in our Sainer auditorium, and we would invite you all to come back for that. Let me tell you a little bit about New Music, New College, for those of you who might be new. This is a concert series and sort of educational laboratory that we have here at the New College of Florida. My name is Mark Dancigers. I'm a professor of music here at the college, and it's my pleasure to lead this series. I've been doing this now for 2 years. This year, we're doing something different and unique, which is that we will have a month-long festival running throughout April featuring performances by students, some guest artists coming in from all over the country, a number of events throughout the month. And so we have a brochure of those events that's available in the lobby. Please have a look at those, and we'd love to see you coming back. I'd also like to extend a welcome to our live stream audience that's joining us on YouTube. So thanks to our digital friends out there who are tuning in to check out this artist conversation. I'd also like to say a couple of thank yous, and I will repeat these on Wednesday, but they're really important, and I just like to get them out there. We are really grateful for the support of so many partners to make this happen. Not just yMusic, of course, which we're really excited about today, but throughout the next couple of weeks. We've received support from the Mellon Foundation, and a Mellon grant here at New College of Florida, the Tourist Development Council from the city of Sarasota, the Florida Department of State. We are supported by New College and the Provost's office. In addition to that, we receive tremendous help from many New College offices in order to make this happen. The New College Foundation, Office of Communications and Marketing, the Department of Humanities, many, many others. So we would like to thank all of our partners, both out in the community and here at New College, for helping to make this happen. We're also supported by donors, and if you are interested in supporting our series through a donation, I would love to talk to you more about what it is that we do at any time. And I truly hope that you enjoy what you experience and hear today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to yMusic to play a little bit for us. And the format of this afternoon is that we will have them play some music, and maybe they can say what it is that they're playing. And from there, we will open it up to reactions from you all and get a conversation going about the music and what you noticed. And I will guide that as we go throughout the next hour. But for now, please welcome yMusic.
Okay, hi. It's quite on. We are going to play one piece for you right now to just kind of introduce you to what we sound like. It's called Tessellations, and it was written in 2018 by Gabriella Smith.
So that was a piece by a composer named Gabriella Smith. The piece is called Tessellations. And so I'd like to open it up to the audience for any response or description of what you heard, anything that you noticed as you were listening, maybe something you had a question about, a type of sound that was being made, just anything that maybe caught your ear or was unexpected. Yes? So yeah, there was a moment in the middle where there's a kind of an idea being passed between the strings, from the cello to the viola to the violin.
It's actually passed along all five of us. And if you listen, you'll see that it's bada dotty 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 dotty, and so we're in 5/8, and so it's sort of like by 5 I meant 6, sorry, but we're in 5/8.
I kind of already have a team.
Yeah, okay. So the five upper folks are doing this crazy thing, which we call a hocket, which just means we're sort of filling in the same kind of melody across the group, and it's really fun to find that because up until that point, we've basically been playing sounds, using our instruments in a way that is not necessarily the thing that we spent, years and years studying. What we really like about playing this piece is that Gabriella has come up with all these different ways for us to make sound on our instrument that we, in some cases, had never tried before, like CJ's amazing flute trumpet.
She asked me to play the bottom of the trumpet valve like it's a flute.
Yeah, so that moment where the texture changed from those kinds of sounds to the hocketed idea, that was something that caught your ear. Yeah, great. Anyone else? Anything that anyone noticed? Yeah, is that a hand or? Yeah.
Are you all following the score, or you just any improvisation as it goes along, or you just
Totally notated.
Yeah, so the question is, are they all following the score, or is there some improvisation within the texture that happens?
It's all notated, but something that Gabriella employs a lot is when she sets up anything that is not locked into a grid rhythmically, but it's still a textural element. She'll write a little box and then give you essentially your job, and then an arrow for a determined amount of time. So you sort of proceed through that at your own rate. So it's not exactly improvisation, but she's not, writing 64th note, grace note, things up there. Just play something like this.
Right. For instance, the flute trumpet thing I just showed you, I have that. It just says, there's a lot of words. It says turn trumpet upside down and blow over the underside of valves while pressing and releasing valves, right? So that's for the whole, that's for 8 measures I do that. And it says when the viola enters with her new texture, that's when I should start winding that sound down. So it's somewhat improvised, but it's controlled improvisation.
Deeply notated improvisation.
Deeply notated improvisation, yeah.
Yes, another question. Go ahead.
are you to classical music, or you just classic?
So
the question is about, I'm sorry, thank you. I'm just repeating for the live stream folks out there. Yeah, so the question is, maybe what's your relationship to classical training or classical music, something like that? Yeah.
So we all went to school for classical music, and we consider what we just played classical music in that, we're using a score, we're playing notated music, and we consider this kind of playing chamber music playing. But you notice we're amplified, and we're making some weird sounds. And another huge part of this group is, as Mark introduced us, we play with songwriters and bands as well. So we sort of take a lot of, we take all of the information and knowledge we have from all the music we play, and we sort of put it into everything. So I think your question is actually kind of a good question. It's sort of what do you call this that we're doing? And we call it classical music, but it was written not that long ago, and we're having a nice time with it.
And it's informed by our experiences doing all different kinds of music. So I like to think that when we play classical music, we perform it as if it's with the energy that you would play a pop music concert, or a rock concert. Yeah, so we try to bring everything that we do, put it inside of pieces like this.
Yeah, so it's a great question about the relationship to training and genre and bringing together influences. Maybe you all could tell us a little bit about how this piece came about. What was the process of working with the composer, getting in touch with them, developing ideas? Is there kind of a story behind this piece called Tessellations?
Sure.
Yeah.
So this is the second piece that Gabriella wrote for us. She wrote another longer piece for us that we had commissioned a few years before, and we were looking to fill out sort of time on an album that we were working on, and wanted a shorter piece that we could use to open the record and many of our concerts. So we sort of put that question to Gabriella. We know Gabriella because she and I were roommates in college. So that's another big feature of us working in contemporary classical music with a lot of composers, is that all of these people are our friends. And so with the process of developing these pieces, often, they will go through the sort of composer in a room thing where they go away for a while and they send you things. But it definitely will always be a situation, and with Gabriella as well, trying these extended techniques where she'll send you a little bit of notation and often a little clip of her trying to produce that sound either in the way that she's telling you to. She's a violinist, so she'll show you, a string technique, or what she thinks can be done on another instrument, or something that she'll do with her voice that you're meant to approximate. And then you sort of respond to that in a text message, and eventually it becomes a piece of music.
Great. So what is it like to put together a piece like this in which you are exploring some new sounds on your instrument? A couple of you mentioned that this particular score asks you to make some sounds that you hadn't really made before on your instrument, or to play it in a new way. There's a vocal part for Alex on flute. I'm just curious if you all could talk a little bit about your experience putting together a piece that asks for this sort of orchestration and arrangement and collection of unusual sounds and things that for you might, I don't know, feel a little bit wild or untamed, or like how do you kind of mesh within an ensemble doing those kinds of techniques?
We love this kind of work. And I think part of the reason we love working with Gabriella is she's always sort of challenging us to think about our instruments in different ways and have different relationships to our instruments from what we might be used to. But I don't think that in any way it's, I don't think it scares us. I think it encourages us, if that makes sense. And it's one of a lot of things that we sort of really, we love working with composers, and we love working, especially when we get to kind of get our hands on the material and mess with it alongside them. So it's a very enjoyable process. Gabriella also is like just so creative, and she knows how instruments work, and oftentimes it's not like we have to fix it. It just feels like it's a hands-on process, which is fun.
We do a lot of kind of demoing sounds for each other too, like, hey, what sound do you like better here? And we kind of help each other find certain sounds like that as well. But I would say, especially with someone like Gabriella, like, something that we'll talk about later in this session is actually what it's been like to write our own music. But I think because we've gained all of this confidence and kind of realized the palette of the colors that our instruments can achieve, we've actually really incorporated that kind of exploratory attitude into our own compositions as well, and like using those little kind of almost accidental sounds as a way to jump off.
So when you have a texture that's composed of like, scratchy sounds and maybe, vocalizations and it's sort of these composites of different types of material, when you're playing them or when you're rehearsing them, are there components of the sound that you are trying to bring out? Is there something that you're kind of trying to project out to the audience? Is it sort of more of a composite thing? Like, how do you think about those textures that are built of these sort of unusual instrumental sonorities?
I think that it has maybe more in common with what we might think as normal music making. Ultimately, like I think we're still always looking for internal hierarchies, and sometimes a texture that's composed of a lot of different things. We're trying to create like this is a bed of sound, and this is a whatever, and this is a solo, and so we have a situation where at the beginning of that piece, you might consider it almost more of a drum machine, like what we're putting together, that then sort of devolves into bringing in pitch material that's more of a second voice. Later on in the piece, you might say that we have regular, quote unquote, like notes and rhythms, and then another texture that is meant to sort of come in and overwhelm it, sort of like as if you see, I don't know, like a mountain or something that gets briefly covered by clouds, and then the cloud sort of goes away. There's a lot of that kind of element in Gabriella's music with this sort of like crossfading of two ideas. So I think that, and those are, specific like textural things that we think about in this music, but it also has a lot in common with how we would approach works by other composers.
I would also just add that the title Tessellations refers to, sort of the Latin root for like a mosaic. So if you can think of all of our little parts as being sort of integral to creating this larger picture, but if you just look at one tile of a mosaic, it doesn't mean much by itself. So it is sort of about like stepping back and crossing your ears, crossing your eyes, whatever, and sort of seeing what the larger picture is for all of its individual pieces.
That's great. So, and we've touched on a couple of different topics already, just in response to a couple of questions, thinking about musical genres, relationship to classical music, the idea that there's almost like a feeling of a piece like this starting with the sort of a drum machine kind of world and then morphing into something where, as a listener, you can sort of sit back and experience a sort of a texture, almost like a landscape moving by. And so performing music like this and putting something together to kind of create all of that, as the group has mentioned, is something that they seek out regularly in a kind of a collaborative process with composers to find those new experiences that are rooted in all of these different places. So I'm wondering if now might be a good time actually to kind of go around the group and have you all just sort of introduce yourselves and maybe say a word or two about what other kinds of projects you do outside of this group, because I think a lot of the interest in thinking about how you all put together music comes from the way that you all kind of bring all these different experiences to bear on this new work. So I'm wondering if you all would be up for that, kind of going around the circle and just saying a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm CJ, and I lived in New York for 20 years. Now I live in Los Angeles, and I play trumpet and French horn, and I try to play in all kinds of different kinds of projects. I play a lot with different kinds of rock bands, and I do a lot of recording, and I was trained as a classical musician, so I still love to do a lot of orchestra playing and chamber music groups, and I just like, my sort of philosophy has always been to be able to do as many different types of performing opportunities as I can, and so to be as varied as possible, and it's been very, very fun. So I try to bring those experiences into this group, and yeah.
I'm very similar, except my name is Alex and I play the flute. And I'm completely different. And I also play a lot of chamber music. I actually play in a group with Mark called Now Ensemble. And I also love playing in orchestra and love playing standard and traditional repertoire for the instrument. And I love to write my own music and songs. And I love to paint. And I love cats and I love clouds.
My experience is very different. First of all, I'm not American. I was born in Portugal and was raised there. And at one point, I moved to New York when I was 23 years old because I found a little limited with the things that I was doing just in Portugal, just the classical music, and I wanted to have the opportunity to expand my horizons as much as possible. and to try, you know, dip my toe in jazz a little bit, or in contemporary music, or in Argentinian folk music, or whatever comes my way. And it has been a lot of fun doing that in New York. Yeah. So.
I have my own. I'm Gabe. I play the cello. I live in New York City. I think a lot of us do a lot of the sort of similar breadth of different activities. So I also record a lot. I try to play a lot of chamber music. I play a good bit of sort of traditional cello standard repertoire as a soloist, as well as new music that I commission. I also make music in sort of a duo project with Gabriella Smith, the composer you just heard. And I probably have skipped something, but basically, I think a lot of us try really hard not to be bored with any one thing and really sort of jump around and bring as much of ourselves into different things as we can.
Nadia, I play the viola, and I love to definitely do chamber music. This yMusic is a group that's very near and dear to my heart. I kind of come from like a contemporary classical music place in the way that I first started my career, but I feel it's actually interesting to listen to us talk about this, because I think when we first started out as a group, we had really different answers, and I think now we're all doing more stuff more often. Especially in the pandemic, I, like many of my friends, like really dived into home recording and stuff like that I had never really done before. I also do a lot of like curating and hosting concerts for different institutions.
Going last, repeating everything everyone else has said. My name is Rob. I play violin. I play other string instruments too, with bows and without them. And I'm very interested in arrangements and spend a lot of time helping flesh out people's ideas and interacting with their songs and stuff like that, whether I'm playing them myself or other people are. And I live in Brooklyn. Good night.
Yes, question.
I'm just curious, you mentioned the pandemic, right? So, like, playing music is something you do together in shared space. And over the last 2 years, that changed, right? With ups and downs. But you mentioned that you kind of started doing more, learning more home recording and doing your own arrangements. But I was just curious about in which ways it changed the way you approach music, if at all, or maybe you appreciate it in a different way, or maybe you had to approach it differently, or it just sucked completely. I don't know. If there were any aspects of the pandemic that made you appreciate or approach music differently.
Yeah, so let me just repeat the question really quick. Over the pandemic, as Rob mentioned, musicians who were sort of in the habit of playing together very, very frequently found themselves, as all of us were, sort of isolated and working more at home and alone. And so one of the things that led to was working on home recordings. And there's a really interesting aspect of that with this group that we'll get to in just a moment. But the question was, I think, were there any aspects of the pandemic that sort of changed the way that you have come to appreciate music or approach it, find yourself kind of thinking differently about either the work that you do or just kind of approaching playing music with people, anything that feels like it's changed?
It's certainly, I mean, it's like a cliche thing to say, but like, of course, we appreciate it more because, when something's taken away from you, you realize how much it meant to you. What I think was interesting, I think we all have like maybe a singular experience with it, but what was interesting to me was how it felt like when I did my first performance coming back, it felt like I had done it yesterday. Like it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like it had been years since performing, because it is like sort of who we are, and like, we've done it, thousands of times at this point. Like it didn't feel like it had been 2 years, it felt like I had done this yesterday, and the last 2 years just didn't count. But it was interesting, like we definitely as a group acquired a whole new skill set, and to be able to write and record with each other from afar, and that's going to be something that we continue to utilize for the rest of our careers. And we certainly don't take anything for granted anymore.
We did struggle though with how do you be a chamber music group when you're on two different coasts? You know, I was in Los Angeles. We were all over the place for a lot of it. People moved to places for the pandemic that they then came back from. But we came up with a couple of different sort of ways to be a group. Number one, we started having meetings, which are, you know, is not something we ever did before, but it really meant a lot to sort of have a time to see each other and say hi, even if it was on the computer. And then there were two sort of funny things we figured out musically. One of them is we really started writing music collaboratively, and we'd sort of pass it around via email from person to person. And I think we're going to share with you in just a moment one of those pieces that we worked on in that way. But another thing that we did very early on is work with a collaborator of Mark and Alex's named Judd Greenstein, who's a composer. And we were trying to figure out, we had a concert that was canceled, and then we were going to do it in the digital space, and we didn't quite know what to do with that, because I don't know if you've tried to ever make music on Zoom or really do anything, like sing happy birthday on Zoom. It doesn't work very well. There's lag, and it's all sort of weird, and you're listening to the loudest person, and it's just very, very difficult to make that work.
Right, you say like 1, 2, 3, clap. It goes.
Yeah, it's just very, very difficult to sort of coordinate anything. So the composer Judd Greenstein actually wrote us a piece that was designed with that in mind, where we all are playing in the same general area, but we don't need to be incredibly rhythmically locked together. And it's really beautiful. It also, like for Judd, I think was an interesting exercise because I've never heard him write music like that before. So, you know, I certainly wouldn't do the pandemic again under any circumstance, but there were interesting opportunities that it afforded creatively, I think, for sure.
And that piece by Judd Greenstein that Nadia is mentioning is on the concert program on Wednesday, so we'll get to look forward to that. So as the group has mentioned, one of the things that they have started to do is write music together. And it would be awesome if we could hear a little bit of that. So I'll turn it back over to the group.
The piece we're about to play is called Zebras.
Wow, that's cool. Um, so tell us a little bit about how that piece came about. I'm curious, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. But yeah, how did that one arrive for all of you? What happened?
I remember working on this in a couple of different locations. There's a few pieces that we've written that kind of traveled with us, but I remember at some point coming up with that little melodic idea and trying to
We started it at your house.
Okay. And trying to find like an accompaniment from it, and like playing with you and being like, not that note, that's good. Like just sort of trying to codify, like, and maybe not even originally realizing that the whole piece was going to be in 7, but just having this weird idea for a sort of a riff kind of. What do you remember?
No, we started the motor thing at the recording studio at Red Bull. Then we put the two things together.
Oh, cool.
Like it's two separate ideas that then went together.
Yeah,
That's right.
There, some of the sort of ideas come from different places, and really, I think for us, what a through line for a lot of the work that we've composed is sort of like, okay, this idea is really good, this idea is really good. Is there something that either ties them together, or how can we start to like massage this into essentially a song form we've used a lot, since it really sort of communicates these ideas, and especially motives that we want to like transform or use in multiple ways. It makes that very apparent.
And one thing that's probably very obvious to us, but that we should mention, is that we didn't start by writing anything down. Like by the time the piece was quote unquote finished, we all knew exactly what we were going to play in all the places, but we don't work with notation as part of our creative process. So part of the reason that we don't remember is because we would like be bouncing ideas off of each other and just be doing like voice memos on the iPhone. And then the next time we get together, we'd like listen to it and be like, oh, we should continue. We should pick that up there. That doesn't work. And it's a very, very interesting kind of casual is maybe the wrong word, but like informal process of co-creation.
I think what's interesting is that it's a very unique process for classical music and a very not unique process for any other type of music. You know, like if you were a rock band and you got together and you came up with ideas and you jammed over things and you recorded them and you picked up where you left off the last time, that would be a very normal way to write a song. But if you're a classical chamber music group, it's kind of like, people are like, oh my God, that's crazy. But we really do function in that way, which I think is which I think leads to, you know, the pieces being in song form, you know, and leads to, you know, I think the music having a certain amount of energy. And
one of the things that's so nice about composing collaboratively, though, is that sometimes people will show up with like an idea that has nothing to do with where your brain was at. And I remember when Alex, you first sang the da-da-da-da, we were like, what? It was great. And it's so neat to be sort of around, you know, smart, cool people with cool ideas, and then sort of riff off of that in a different way. It's so much less scary, to be perfectly honest, than like looking at a blank page of music by yourself and saying, you know, create a thing.
yeah, there was one note she sang that we all thought was wrong. We were like, yeah, that's really cool, except you keep singing this note. And she was like, yeah, that's what I want. And we were like, oh, whoa! And then that changed the whole piece for us, you know.
Great. So any questions or did I cut someone off? No. Okay. Any questions or reactions to that piece, which is called Zebra? Zebras.
More than one. Mark.
More than one zebra.
More than
yeah.
one.
So any comments, questions? There's a question way in the back there, Mr. Silver.
Yeah, no, it's comment. I just love the use of voice as instrument. You know, it wasn't singing words. It was voice as instrument. I thought that was great, and it just fit so well into that piece. So
Cool. Thank you. That's great to hear. Yeah, I sometimes, like when we're writing together, I find that my quickest way to expression is to vocalize rather than try to play something on my instrument. So sometimes, you know, I'll be like, oh, I have this idea, or I hear this thing, and I'll sing it, and then we try to find an instrument for it, and then we're like, oh no, actually, it should just be sung. But then it's like, it's really cool to try to find a way to sing where it doesn't necessarily just sound like a voice or like there should be words. But actually the title Zebras is because when I first sang it, the lyrics were like about zebras and how they have no stripes, but that's also a lie because they do. So obviously the lyrics had to go.
The lyrics transformed into a title. Perfect. Yeah, and so by the way, for the live stream audience, the comment was just that it's a really interesting and cool use of the voice as an instrument in an instrumental texture. So kind of a maybe a kind of a non-traditional use of vocalizing. So yes, any other questions? Yeah.
But also, I thought really interesting in this was that the vocalizing was the part that didn't introduce unfamiliar techniques. It sounded like a voice singing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the comment is just that in this particular piece, the vocal part is not introducing a kind of a new or maybe somewhat unusual instrumental technique, which is something that characterizes, what everyone is playing. Yeah, I'm wondering if anyone has a response to that. Yeah, Rob.
Totally. I think with the way that we write and what we gravitate towards material-wise, there can be a tendency to pile on complexity, and we're chasing after all kinds of unique moments that would surprise us, and especially as like young writers together, like we've been doing this for a year or two. We really want to feel satisfied by what we've created and know that we're not just sort of like, okay, we had that idea, then we did it twice, and like, but to speak to what you said, which I think is a really great point, that we are still trying to balance in the familiar, the word accessible is maybe not the right one, but and nostalgia and other things that like I think you can maybe associate with the human voice, and so that's cool that it's playing that role, like a more familiar role in a piece that is maybe more complex overall than it even sounds. Like that's another thing, is a sort of Trojan horse of like, well, this piece is hopefully fun and you could like sing the melody back to us and feel comfortable listening to it, but the whole thing's in 7 and there's some wild stuff going on, but it doesn't come across that way. Maybe the voice helps with that, helps more people listen to it or something.
One of the funny anecdotes about the fact that we don't write music down when we're conceiving of it is that for a long time, several people in this group thought of the piece in a fast 7, and several people were thinking of it in a slow 7. And we didn't have to resolve that because we didn't have to notate it. And I think now we sort of have come to a place, I don't know what people think now, fast 7.
I'm slow 7 the whole way through.
Amazing, yeah. So, meaning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is the fast one. Or you can think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it's just 2 of those little 7s that sort of fill up the one big 7. It's just funny that if we had to come up with how to notate it, we'd come up with what the measure was, what the rhythmic structure of the piece was, and I love that we just don't have to do that in this context.
We'd have such a huge fight that we don't have to have.
Right.
That's great.
No, but that's really interesting. That notation, one of the things that it does is it eradicates some mysteries, right? And it does that in the name of, clarity and communication to, a group of 6 musicians, more, 20, 100, right? And so that everyone can kind of rapidly get onto the same page. So there's some real advantages to the way that if you were to write it down, say like 7/8 versus 7/4 or something like that, it would clarify a certain question about compositional intent, but you're saying like one of the things that you all enjoy is actually leaving it as something that could go either way, or some people could actually feel differently, and that's a possibility that's opened up by working compositionally, but not starting from a place of notation.
Yeah, I think that also is kind of also similar to the way a more traditional band would operate, right? Like where you're not worried about another group playing this, or you're not composing it for anyone can get this music and play it. It's like, no, this is our song, this is our piece, so we don't need to codify it and make it, in that way.
But yeah, and so the interesting thing though too, and again, just to kind of wander down this road, because it's a fun one, because it has to do with the groove that the piece projects. And so I'm wondering that, kind of despite, maybe people feeling it slightly differently on a what you might call a metrical level, do you all think that you that there's an overriding sense of something that is shared and projected out kind of collectively. Like, in other words, fundamentally, like the question, is the question resolved and projected, or is it more like, no, people are kind of doing it a little bit differently and it kind of coheres?
My hunch is that, that it does sort of, everybody does things differently and it coheres just together, just because I think for us, the meter that it's in depends on the mental organization that we need to execute our part in a comfortable way. Like for me, I pick a big 7 because all of my beginning part is very clearly in a big 7, and most of the rest of my material is just sort of straight 8th notes. And for my brain, it's a lot more useful to have a bigger overarching structure with very regular beats than to have things that can be compressed or whatever. It helps me keep myself in time, and other people's parts that they sort of mess with that more. And so for how I approach that, I need something that's like a little bit more like there's the drummer going in 4/4 while like people are doing whatever they're gonna do. That's just me, but I have a feeling that everybody else is sort of doing their own journey.
And I would venture a guess that on a spiritual level, we're more on the same page about this music because it came from our collective brains than we are about other people's music. Not that we don't get there with other people's music, but this is like we've been in it since it was a kernel of an idea. So I think it's the most cohesive in a way, even though there is room for us to be thinking about these little things differently.
Great. Any other questions or just responses to what you heard in Zebras? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, Kenan. Yeah, so I'm sorry, just super quick. Just to repeat, so the comment is that, yes, in a way, this is kind of similar to how a rock band might work, and thinking about the example of the Beatles, they're able to, as they were creating songs, they would pass around ideas, and that this contributed to a certain sense of spontaneity and maybe playfulness that is different than a composer just kind of starting from a place of notating all on their own. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the big advantage to working this way is it's collaborative. I think there's composers blow my mind all the time, and some of them can go off in a room with their own brain and figure out how to get what's in their brain onto notation and give it to us, and we can recreate that. And I think that's also magic in some ways. It's really, though, interesting. There's so many different ways that music comes about, right? Like there's that thing where composer goes in a room, has ideas, writes ideas down. There's also like person writes song, wants to collaborate with Rob Moose on an arrangement, and then fleshes that song out even more in a collaborative way with Rob, but the song sort of came from somebody. And then what I like about this form of collaborative composition, not on paper, is that really in the ideating process, that like very first thing where you're like scooping something out of the sky and turning it into an idea, we can bounce it off each other at that first moment. So there is never a like, okay, me, Nadia, I have to come up with something and show my work to people later. It just feels like it's a living thing from, and a collaborative thing from step one.
Yeah, and being creative and writing or creating any sort of art is like really like putting yourself out there. It can be very like intimidating, and you need to feel like safe and like you could be you're in like a trusted environment, and to really be as creative as you can possibly be. And some people can do that alone in a room in front of with a pencil and paper, but for us, I think that we spent so much time. We spent like over 10 years together as a group before we started writing music together. And so like we developed a trust with each other. And I know that if like I have an idea and none of them like it, it's probably a bad idea. And they're not going to think like that I have bad ideas, But if I have an idea and everybody, just that one bad idea. But if one of us has an idea and the other 5 of us like it and we run with it and we put another thing on it and another thing on it, like if it passes like the muster of like all 6 of us collectively enjoying it, we kind of don't care if anyone else likes it because we have 6 like opinions that we really, really trust. And I think people, if the 6 of us like it, other people are going to connect with it as well. So it's a really like safe way to create that allows you to just really feel free to throw anything at the wall and see if it sticks.
That's great. So what I love about that idea too is the fact that collaboration is something that encourages creativity in that specific way, that it provides ideally a kind of a trusting environment for creating new work. So that's a great idea. And anyone else would like to ask a question or give a comment? Yes.
How does that collaboration work when you're developing a piece with a choreographer like Bill T. Jones? Do you structure first, he just adapts the choreography then to your piece, or do you integrate, massage, change based on his requirements or your requirements?
Yeah, so the question is, what's the collaborative process like if you're working with, say, choreography? Does anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, actually, our collaboration with Bill T. Jones was through a piece written by a composer who wasn't us. So in that case, and in many cases, when you work with dance, it's sort of music is delivered, dance is put on top of it. In my own personal life, I actually have done experiments sort of doing the opposite, where you see a dance and you score the dance, which can be really interesting, but that is, as far as I know, not really common practice, especially for bigger collaborations.
I would think if we had the opportunity to work in this compositional way with choreography, what might be really fun would be to present a series of fragments of the ideas and see like what's kind of clicking, and then be able to sort of expand, like start, receive, and then kind of go back and forth in a way that wouldn't maybe as easily work when everything had to be notated and the like person would have to disappear and come back with more work. That would be a really fun thing to try.
Yeah. Great. So I think that's about all the time we have for this artist conversation. I want to say thank you all so much again for coming, and again invite you to the concert, which is Wednesday night, April 6th at 8 o'clock right here in Sainer. We got spooked by the possibility of the rain, and so moved it from outdoors to indoors, and we're really looking forward to presenting all of that wonderful music for you on Wednesday night. There's a pre-concert talk at 7:30, so if you want to hear me talk a little bit more about why I'm so excited about presenting yMusic, then drop in at 7:30. There's also a reception after the concert where you'll have a chance to talk a little bit with the artists. So thank you so much again for coming, and we hope to see you back in a couple of days. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah.
Really great.
Thanks, that was really enjoyable.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Manu.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Try to make it
Thank
on
you.
Wednesday. Maybe I'll bring
Okay.
a couple of my kids. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's a good thing for that.
I find that it's ironic that you tend to answer that question a surprising amount of times while wearing stripes.
Why do I?
No, yeah, this is definitely
Why do I?
kind of developed in what we think of as like contemporary classical.
Are we supposed to?
Yeah, these
It works.
I think Stravinsky does.
Yeah. So I'm going to need this again.